My twin sister showed up at 2 a.m., bleeding from her nose. When she finally told me the truth about her husband, we decided to swap places that very night. I didn't know that Robert was far more dangerous than I could have ever imagined. Where are you watching from today? Let us know your location in the comments below, hit the like button, and subscribe to the channel. It all started 3 months ago when Sarah and I were having dinner at my small apartment in downtown Phoenix, Arizona. It was Sunday night, just like we always did since we were kids. But this time, something felt different. My twin sister, identical to me in every detail, was quieter than usual. She kept touching her right wrist, as if something was bothering her. Is everything okay, Sarah? I asked, pouring more coffee. After 52 years of being twin sisters, I knew when something was wrong. She smiled, but it was that strange smile she used when she wanted to hide something. Perfectly fine, Emma. Just tired from work. Sarah worked as a secretary in a law office, while I was a nurse at the City General Hospital. We lived completely different lives, but we always maintained that special connection twins have. That's why I knew she was lying. How's Robert? I asked, watching her tense up at the mention of her husband. They had married 5 years ago, after what seemed like a perfect courtship. Robert worked in construction and seemed like a quiet man, though he always gave me a strange feeling I could never explain. Fine. He's working a lot lately. Got several big projects. Her voice sounded mechanical, as if she were repeating something she had rehearsed. When she left that night, I noticed she walked strangely, more stiffly than normal. But Sarah had always been proud. She never asked for help. So I decided to wait until the next week to talk to her more calmly. I never imagined the next time I would see her would be at 2 in the morning, desperately pounding on my door with her face shattered. The sound of the pounding woke me instantly. As a nurse, I was used to emergencies, but something about those knocks chilled me to the bone. I rushed to the door, and when I opened it, my world collapsed. Sarah was standing there, shaking in the rain. Her lip was split, she had a black eye she could barely open, and fresh blood dripped from her nose. Her blouse was torn, and I could see bruises on her arms. But what impacted me the most were her eyes, filled with pure terror. Please, she whispered before collapsing into my arms. I can't go back home. I immediately brought her inside, my hands shaking as I helped her sit on the couch. My medical training kicked in automatically, but my sister's heart was completely shattered. Who did this to you? I asked, though I already knew the answer. Was it Robert? She didn't respond. She just hugged herself and started to cry, a silent, wrenching sob that told me everything I needed to know. As I treated Sarah's wounds, every bruise I uncovered filled me with a fury I'd never felt before. But what she told me next changed everything. It wasn't the first time, was it? Sarah whispered as I carefully cleaned the blood from her face. Her words hit me like a hammer. It's been happening for months, but tonight was different. I sat across from her, trying to control my anger. Why didn't you tell me? Why did you endure this in silence? I was scared, Emma. Robert threatened me. He said if I told anyone, especially you, that he... She stopped, her eyes filling with fresh terror. What did he say, Sarah? That he would hurt you, that he knew where you worked, that he knew your routine. He said he could make you disappear, and no one would suspect him because officially he'd be home with me. My blood ran cold. This man hadn't just been hitting my sister. He had been using me as a threat to keep her silent. Tonight was different because... Sarah took a shaky breath. Because I told him I was pregnant. The world stopped. You're pregnant? No, she quickly replied. I lied. I thought it would calm him down, make him change. But he got furious. He said he didn't want kids with me, that I wasn't even good for that. And then he started hitting me harder than ever. I got up from the couch, pacing in circles around the living room. Rage consumed me, but a cold determination was also forming in my mind. Does he know where you are right now? I asked. I don't think so. I told him I was going to the hospital for the injuries, that I'd be back before dawn. He probably went out drinking with his buddies to celebrate. An idea began to form in my head. A dangerous but perfect idea. Sarah, look at me. I sat down across from her again. Can Robert tell the difference between you and me in the dark? She frowned, confused. What do you mean? We're identical. Same height, same weight, same voice. The only real difference is that small scar on your right hand from when you fell as a kid. But in the dark, or if I wear gloves, Sarah's eyes widened as she understood my plan. Emma, no, it's too dangerous. More dangerous than letting you go back to him? More dangerous than allowing him to keep hurting you? I got up, walking toward my closet. We're switching places. Tonight, Sarah. Are you crazy? What are you going to do when you get there? I'm going to truly get to know your husband. I'm going to see what he's capable of when he thinks no one is watching. I pulled out clothes similar to what she was wearing, and I'm going to make sure he can never hurt you again. Emma, please, think this through. Robert can be very violent when he drinks. And if he finds out it's not me, he won't find out. And even if he did, I'm a nurse. I know how to defend myself. Plus, I added with a smile that didn't reach my eyes, I have something you don't have. What? A plan. And contacts who can help us end this for good. Sarah looked at me for a long moment. I saw fear in her eyes, but also something else. Real hope for the first time in months. Would you really do this for me? Sarah, we're twin sisters. We've shared everything since Mom's womb. I won't let that man destroy you. I sat next to her and took her hands, but I need you to trust me completely. And I need you to tell me everything about him, everything. At 4:30 a.m., I was driving toward Sarah's house, dressed in her clothes and carrying her keys. What I found upon arriving confirmed that Robert was much worse than I had imagined. The house was dark, just as Sarah had predicted. I parked the car exactly where she had instructed and walked toward the front door with silent steps. My hands were trembling slightly as I inserted the key into the lock. The interior smelled of alcohol and cigarettes. I could hear Robert's deep snores coming from the bedroom. Sarah had given me specific instructions. Enter silently, go straight to bed, and pretend to be asleep until morning. But as I walked through the house, which was supposed to be my sister's home, I began to notice details that chilled my blood. In the living room, there was a hole in the wall that looked the size of a fist. The furniture was slightly misplaced, as if there had been a struggle. And on the kitchen floor, there were stains that looked like dried blood. How many times had this happened? How many nights had Sarah returned to clean her own blood from the floor? I went to the bedroom with extreme caution. Robert was sprawled on the bed, completely drunk. Even asleep, his face had a cruel expression. He was a big man, probably 6 feet tall, with hands that looked capable of doing a lot of damage. I lay down on the opposite side of the bed, as far away from him as possible, and waited. The plan was simple. Observe his morning behavior, look for evidence of his violence, and find something I could use against him. But at 6:01 a.m., when Robert woke up, I discovered that my plan hadn't contemplated a crucial detail. Robert grunted without even fully opening his eyes. "Get over here." His voice had a tone that immediately put me on alert. It wasn't a request, it was an order. When I didn't move fast enough for his liking, I felt his hand grip my arm with brutal force. "Didn't you hear me?" His breath stank of alcohol. I said, "Get over here." This was the moment of truth. I had to act exactly as my sister would have, or my cover would be compromised before I could gather any useful information. "Good morning," I mumbled, trying to sound submissive as Sarah had instructed me. "It ain't a good morning for you," he replied, pulling me toward him. "After last night, you gotta make it up to me." What happened in the next 20 minutes showed me a side of violence I had never personally experienced. Robert wasn't just a man who hit when he was drunk. He was a calculated predator who used physical and psychological intimidation as tools for total control. Every whispered threat, every painful grip, every word designed to destroy a person's self-esteem gave me more evidence that this man was a danger not only to Sarah, but to any woman who crossed his path. But it also gave me something else. The absolute determination to destroy him. When he finally got up to shower, I took the opportunity to explore the house further. And in his home office, I found something that completely changed the scope of my mission. A small safe, partially open, and inside documents that showed Robert wasn't just an ordinary construction worker. He was part of a drug trafficking network that operated through his construction projects. I photographed everything with Sarah's phone, my hands trembling not from fear, but from excitement. This was much better than evidence of domestic violence. This was evidence of federal crimes. When Robert came out of the shower, I was already back in bed, pretending to sleep. But now I had a completely new plan. A plan that would not only free Sarah, but put this monster exactly where he belonged. For 3 days, I maintained the facade, living as Sarah while collecting evidence. But on the fourth day, Robert received a call that chilled my blood and showed me I was playing with fire. "Yeah, everything's under control," Robert was saying on the phone while I pretended to make breakfast in the kitchen. "The shipment will be ready by Friday. No one will suspect a thing." I approached silently, taking advantage of his concentration on the conversation. Through the slightly open door, I could see him reviewing a map of the city with several locations marked in red. "No, the problem with my wife is solved," he continued. "I taught her a lesson she won't forget. She won't be causing trouble anymore." The coldness with which he spoke about beating my sister turned my stomach. But I had to maintain my composure because what I heard next changed everything. The nurse? Yeah, the twin sister. I already made sure my wife understands that if she opens her mouth, the sister will pay the consequences. She's perfect because she works at the City General Hospital. No one will suspect if something happens to her. My blood froze. They were talking about me. And Robert had already planned to use me as a threat long before I decided to swap places with Sarah. Exactly. If anything goes wrong with the Friday shipment, I have an insurance card. The sister disappears, period. I had to get out of the kitchen before he heard my ragged breathing. I went upstairs to the bathroom and sat on the edge of the tub, trying to process what I had just heard. He wasn't just a drug trafficker. He was a calculating psychopath who had turned my existence into part of his contingency plan. And Friday, that was in 2 days. Something big was going to happen. I needed more information, but I also needed to be more careful. If Robert suspected I wasn't really Sarah, my sister and I would be in mortal danger. That afternoon, while he was at work, I systematically searched the entire house. In the basement, behind some old boxes, I found something that took my breath away. A small but lethal arsenal. 3 handguns, ammunition, and what looked like drugs packaged for distribution. I photographed everything, but this time I also wrote down the serial numbers of the weapons. If those weapons had been used in crimes, the police would have a solid case. But the most disturbing thing I found was in a box labeled insurance. Photographs of women, many women, and they weren't normal photos. They looked like surveillance photos, taken without the women knowing. There were photos of me leaving the hospital, photos of Sarah at her job, but also photos of other women I didn't recognize. One of the photos had a sticky note. Maria Johnson, eliminated. Another said, Carla Stevens, problem solved. This was no longer just about drugs or domestic violence. Robert was potentially a serial killer. When he returned that night, I had to use all my willpower to act normally, but I had made a decision. On Friday, I wasn't going to let what he had planned happen. During dinner, I decided to risk getting more information. "How was work?" I asked, trying to sound casual. "Good. Friday's going to be a big day. We're finishing a large project." "What kind of project?" His eyes narrowed slightly. "Why the curiosity? You've never been interested in my work before." My heart raced, but I kept calm. "I just wanted to know if you'll be late. To make dinner." He relaxed a little. "Probably very late. In fact, it's better if you don't wait up for me." And then Robert added with a voice that chilled my blood, "I hope you haven't been thinking about doing stupid things, like calling your sister or telling her things you shouldn't know." Of course not," I replied, looking him in the eyes. "Good, because if I find out you've been playing games with me, the consequences will be permanent." That night, while he slept, I made the most important decision of my life. I was going to end this, but I wasn't going to wait until Friday. In the early morning of the 5th day, as I checked Robert's phone, I discovered messages that revealed the true dimension of his criminal network. He wasn't just a trafficker anymore. He was the leader of an organization that had been operating for years under the facade of his construction company. The messages were explicit. "The shipment from Colombia arrives Friday at 10 p.m. Pier 7. The judges are already paid. If the Friday operation goes well, we expand to Dallas, Texas." But what shocked me the most was a message from 3 months ago. "Witness problem solved. Maria Johnson can no longer testify. Use the method we discussed." Maria Johnson, the same name I had seen in the basement photographs, marked as eliminated. Robert wasn't just trafficking drugs. He had been murdering witnesses and anyone who posed a threat to his operation. And according to the messages, he had contacts in the local police and the judicial system. The corruption reached levels I hadn't imagined, but I also found something I could use to my advantage. The names and phone numbers of all his contacts, including corrupt cops, bought judges, and other traffickers. It was enough information to dismantle the entire network. The problem was that if I handed this information over to the local police, it could end up in the wrong hands. I needed to take it to the federal level. That morning, while Robert was in the shower, I made the most important call of my life. I contacted the DEA hotline using the phone at the hospital where I worked. Drug Enforcement Agency, how can I help you? I have information about a drug trafficking operation scheduled for this Friday. It includes murder, police corruption, and bought judges. Can you provide specific details? I have photographs of the drugs, weapon serial numbers, financial documents, and evidence of at least 2 murders. There was a pause. Ma'am, we're going to need you to come into our offices immediately. I can't yet. I'm infiltrated in the organization, but I can provide you with all the information you need over the phone and send you the photos. I gave them all the details, the house address, the location of the basement arsenal, the names of the corrupt contacts, and the information about the Friday shipment. Ma'am, this is extremely dangerous. If this person suspects what you're doing, I know, but I can't leave now. I need to maintain my cover until you can act. Understood. We're going to send a special team, but we need you to maintain constant contact. If you feel you are in immediate danger, get out of there immediately. When I hung up, my hands were trembling, but for the first time in days, I felt I had control of the situation. The DEA had federal jurisdiction and the resources to handle an operation of this magnitude. But that afternoon, when Robert returned from work, something had changed in his behavior. He was more alert, more suspicious. Did you make any calls today? He asked abruptly. Only to the doctor to confirm my appointment next week, I lied. What doctor? My mind raced. Sarah had mentioned she had regular doctor's appointments for anxiety issues, probably caused by the abuse. The therapist, Dr. Miller, for my anxiety. His expression relaxed slightly. Good, because one of my contacts told me there are rumors that someone is passing information to federal authorities, and if I find out that someone is close to me. He didn't finish the sentence, but the message was clear. That night, while he slept, I received a text message from a number I didn't recognize. This is the DEA, operation confirmed for tomorrow, 6 p.m. Maintain your position until then. If there's immediate danger, respond help. Friday had arrived. In less than 24 hours, everything would be over. But I also knew that the next 24 hours would be the most dangerous of my life. Because if Robert discovered who I really was, he wouldn't just kill me. He would make sure Sarah paid the ultimate price. On Friday morning, Robert woke up with a different, more aggressive, more paranoid energy, and what he told me during breakfast confirmed that the day was going to be a nightmare. Today is a very important day, Sarah, he said while dressing in all black clothing, and I need to be sure you won't cause any trouble. What do you mean? I asked, though I already feared the answer. I mean you're coming with me today, everywhere. My stomach sank. Why? You've never asked me that before. Because I've never had an operation this big before, and because you've been acting weird lately. His eyes locked onto mine with an intensity that made me break out in a cold sweat. Different. I don't know what you're talking about. He came closer to me, his body projecting an immediate physical threat. Don't you? Because I've noticed little things, Sarah. The way you walk, the way you talk, even the way you look at me. My heart pounded, but I tried to keep my calm. I'm nervous because of everything that's happened. The hitting, the tension at home. Maybe, he said, but his tone indicated he didn't fully believe me. Either way, today you'll be where I can see you at all times. This complicated everything tremendously. The DEA expected me to be at the house to guide them to the basement arsenal. But if Robert took me with him to the drug operation, I would not only lose my cover, but I would probably end up dead when things went wrong. I needed to find a way to send a signal to the DEA without Robert noticing. During the car ride, he made several stops. First a warehouse where he picked up 3 armed men. Then an office where he spoke in code on the phone for 20 minutes. Finally, we arrived at the pier where the shipment was due. Stay in the car. he ordered. Don't move, don't talk to anyone, don't touch anything. If I see you do anything suspicious, I'll end you right here. From the car, I could see the whole operation unfolding. There were at least 8 armed men, 2 boats waiting at Pier 7, and vehicles strategically positioned for a quick getaway. But what alarmed me the most was seeing 2 police uniforms among Robert's group. The corrupt officers I had read about in the messages were there, actively participating in the operation. At 9:30 p.m., a large ship approached the pier. The moment had arrived. Using Sarah's phone, I sent a discreet message to the DEA number. Operation in progress. Pier 7, at least 8 armed. Corrupt police present. The response came immediately. Teams in position. Stay clear of crossfire. At 10:15 p.m., as they were unloading the boxes from the ship, all hell broke loose. Bright lights illuminated the entire pier from different directions. Amplified voices shouted, "DEA, everyone on the ground!" The shooting started immediately. Robert ran toward the car, his face contorted in rage. But instead of fleeing, he pulled out a handgun and aimed it directly at my head. "You," he growled with pure hatred. "You called them. I don't know what you're talking about." I tried to keep up my act until the end. "Liar," he yelled. "I knew something was wrong. I knew you weren't the same." At that moment, I knew my cover had been completely blown. Robert had suspected me from the first day, but he had been playing with me, using me to try and find out what I knew. "Where is the real Sarah?" he demanded, pressing the gun against my temple. "In a place where you can never hurt her again," I replied, no longer pretending. His smile was the most terrifying thing I'd ever seen. "Then you're going to die like her." But just as his finger tightened on the trigger, a red light appeared on his forehead. A DEA sniper had him in their sights. "Drop the weapon," a voice shouted from the loudspeakers. "You are surrounded." The next minute was the longest of my life. Robert was holding me as a human shield, but the agents were closing in from all directions. He had no escape, but a cornered animal is always the most dangerous. With the gun still pressed to my head, Robert forced me to walk toward an abandoned warehouse on the pier. What I discovered inside showed me that his crimes were even more extensive than I had imagined. "Walk slowly," Robert growled, using my body as a shield while the DEA agents kept a prudent distance. "Any sudden movement, and your twin sister will have to identify your corpse." The warehouse was full of boxes, but it wasn't just drugs. There were documents, computers, and something that chilled my blood. A wall full of photographs of women with notes next to them. "Like my collection?" Robert asked with a diabolical smile, noticing my expression. Every one of these women thought she was smarter than me. The photographs showed at least 20 different women. Some I recognized from local newspapers, cases of missing women that had never been solved. "Maria Johnson was especially problematic," he continued, pointing to a photo with a red X marked over it. "She thought she could testify against my operation. I showed her how wrong she was." "You're a monster," I whispered. "I'm a businessman who eliminates obstacles." He pressed the gun harder against my head. "And you, dear twin sister, have become a very big obstacle." From outside, I could hear negotiating voices from the DEA trying to establish communication, but Robert wasn't interested in surrendering. "You know what bothers me the most?" he asked while checking his phone with one hand. "That for 5 years, I beat your sister to keep her quiet, and in the end, I ended up beating the wrong person for 3 days." My blood boiled. "The beatings you gave me don't count. Sarah's free now." "Oh yeah? Are you sure about that?" His smile widened. "Because while you were playing detective, I had my men watching your apartment. And guess what they found?" My heart stopped. "You're lying." "I called my contacts the moment I knew the DEA was involved. Your twin sister is no longer a problem." For the first time in a week, I felt real terror. Not for me, but for Sarah. If something had happened to her because of me. "But don't worry," Robert continued. "They'll find her body in your apartment, and when I escape from here, they'll think you killed her before coming here to ruin my operation. The DEA knows I'm the one who contacted them." "Oh yeah? And how are they going to prove that when the only calls in the phone records are from your dead sister's number?" He had thought of everything. Even if I survived tonight, he had built a narrative where I would appear as the killer of my own sister. But then I heard something that gave me hope. My own phone ringing from Robert's pocket. He had taken it from my apartment when he sent his men. Don't answer it, I told him. Why? Is it your accomplice? It rang 4 times before stopping. Then it rang again and again. Someone was calling persistently, and only one person had reason to do that right now. Answer it. I changed my tactic. If it's who I think it is, you're going to want to hear what they have to say. Robert hesitated. Then he activated the speaker without letting go of the gun from my head. Hello? Robert? Sarah's voice filled the warehouse. It's Sarah, your wife. Robert froze. That's impossible. Is it? Because I'm looking at 3 of your men unconscious in Emma's apartment, and I'm also looking at 2 federal agents who are explaining to me exactly who you really are. Robert's expression changed from confusion to absolute fury. His perfect plan was crumbling before his eyes. Sarah is dead, he yelled into the phone. No, Robert, but your criminal career is? Sarah's voice on the phone revealed that she had been working with the DEA since I disappeared. Robert realized he had completely underestimated the twin sister he thought he controlled. How? Robert asked, his voice filled with disbelief. My men went specifically to kill me? Sarah's voice sounded stronger than I had heard it in the years. It's funny, Robert. Turns out when you tell your twin sister, who's a nurse, that you know exactly how to detect vital signs, she learns quickly how to fake being dead. From the phone, I could hear background noises, official voices, crackling radios, the sound of a major police operation in progress. Besides, Sarah continued, Emma left me very specific instructions on what to do if she didn't return in 72 hours, including the direct number of the federal agent she had been working with. Robert pressed the gun harder against my head, but I could feel his confidence collapsing. This changes nothing. I still have your sister. Do you? Because the DEA snipers aiming at you right now might have a different opinion. At that moment, red laser sight lights began to appear all over Robert's body. Not 1, but at least 5. The agents had completely surrounded the warehouse. Robert Garcia Mendoza, an amplified voice boomed from outside. You are surrounded by federal agents. Drop the weapon and release the hostage. Garcia Mendoza? I asked, surprised. That's not even your real name? Robert laughed bitterly. For 5 years, your sister lived with a man whose true identity she didn't know. Robert Herrera died in rural Nevada 10 years ago. I took his documents and his life. The revelation stunned me. Sarah had been married to a complete stranger who had been living under a stolen identity. How many women have you killed, Garcia? I asked, using his real name. The ones in the photos, 24. But I've killed many more for other reasons. His voice had become strangely calm, as if he were proud. Some for business, some for pleasure, some just because they got in my way. He was confessing to multiple murders with federal agents listening to every word. It was as if he had decided he had nothing left to lose. And the corrupt cops, the bold judges. A network that took me years to build. But don't worry, they're all going to be arrested tonight. Your little operation has destroyed decades of work. The phone was still open, and I could hear Sarah talking to someone in the background. Then her voice addressed us again. Garcia, the agents want you to know they have the arsenal in your basement, all the drugs, all the documents, and the bodies you buried in the land behind your house. What bodies? I asked, though I wasn't sure I wanted to know the answer. Apparently, Sarah replied, there were 7 bodies buried in our backyard, women who had disappeared over the years. The monster my sister had lived with was even worse than anyone had imagined. He wasn't just a violent trafficker. He was a serial killer who had been operating under the radar for years. Garcia, the amplified voice shouted again, you have 30 seconds to release the hostage before we take extreme measures. 30 seconds, Garcia yelled back, to decide between dying here or dying in prison. You could live, I told him, if you surrender now. To spend the rest of my life in a cell? No, thank you. His grip on the gun tightened. If I'm going to die, I'm taking someone with me. But I had been counting the seconds too, and I knew exactly when he would act. On the 29th second, I did something Robert Garcia didn't expect. Instead of trying to run, I lunged directly at him. The revelation of who he really was and what he had done gave me a strength I didn't know I had. My movement took him completely by surprise. For a week, I had acted like his submissive victim, just as Sarah had been trained to behave. But in the final moment, what he saw was Emma, a nurse who had dealt with violent situations, who knew how to disarm aggressive patients, and who was no longer afraid to die. When I lunged at him, his first instinct was to pull me back, but that moved the gun away from my head just enough for the snipers to have a clear shot. The first shot hit his right shoulder, making him drop the weapon. The second hit his leg, making him collapse. In seconds, the warehouse was filled with federal agents. But Garcia had one last surprise. As the agents approached, he smiled with blood dripping from his mouth and activated something on his phone. "You thought this was all?" He laughed as the agents administered first aid to keep him alive. "You thought you were the only ones who knew how to use technology?" One of the agents immediately checked his phone. "It's a bomb," she shouted. "Evacuate the building now." But it wasn't a bomb in the warehouse. It was something much worse. "Your sister." Garcia looked directly into my eyes. "She's at my real house. Not the house you've been living in. My real house. And in 30 seconds, that house is going to explode with her inside." My world collapsed. "What real house?" "You thought a criminal of my caliber would live in a common suburb. That was the show house for the fake Robert Herrera identity. My real operation runs from an estate outside the city." The agents were already shouting coordinates over the radio, but Garcia continued speaking. "I told your sister to go there to collect additional evidence. I told her it was important for your rescue." His smile was diabolical. "In 15 seconds, she'll find out how important it really was." "Cancel the detonation," an agent yelled, pressing Garcia's phone. "Cancel it now." "I can't. It activated automatically when my heart rate dropped too low from the shots. Security system." "Give me the address of the estate," I demanded. "Why?" "The emergency teams will never get there in time." But a familiar voice boomed from the DEA radios. "Agent Miller speaking. Sarah is safe. I repeat, the civilian is safe." Garcia froze. "That's impossible." The voice continued. "The suspect anticipated the trap. She never went to the estate. She has been in protective custody at our offices for the last 6 hours." Garcia's expression changed from satisfaction to absolute confusion. "What? But how?" It was then that I realized something that filled me with pride about my twin sister. Sarah had played Garcia exactly how he had tried to play us. "Sarah never fully trusted you," I told him, finally understanding. "Even after years of abuse, a part of her always knew you were dangerous. When you told her to go to your real house, she immediately suspected it was a trap." Garcia closed his eyes. His final master plan had failed because he had underestimated the woman he had spent years convincing was stupid and weak. But the night wasn't over because as the agents took Garcia away in an ambulance under custody, Agent Miller handed me a phone. "Your sister wants to talk to you." "Emma?" Sarah's voice sounded different, stronger, more confident. "I'm here, sister. There's something else you need to know. Something Garcia doesn't know we know." What Sarah had discovered while in protective custody changed the entire case. Garcia hadn't been working alone. He had a silent partner who was even more dangerous than him. "Emma," Sarah said on the phone as I was escorted out of the warehouse. While I was giving my testimony to the DEA, they showed me photographs of all of Garcia's known associates. And I recognized someone who? Dr. Miller, my therapist. The world stopped around me. "What?" The man Garcia thought was just my doctor for anxiety was actually his main partner. Dr. Miller not only knew about the abuse, he was documenting it for Garcia as a form of perfect psychological control. Agent Miller, who had been listening to our conversation, immediately got on the phone with her base. "We need teams at Dr. Miller's clinic now and check his female patient history for the last 5 years." Sarah continued. "Emma, all those women in Garcia's photographs were Dr. Miller's patients. He identified them as problematic or potentially dangerous to the operation, and Garcia eliminated them." "How did you discover this?" "Because when the DEA asked me about Garcia, I casually mentioned that I had been seeing a therapist for years for my anxiety. When I gave them the name, 5 agents immediately became alert." Agent Miller hung up her call and addressed me. "Dr. Miller has been under federal investigation for 2 years, but we could never prove the direct connection until now." "What kind of investigation?" I asked. "Human trafficking, money laundering, and suspected serial killings." His clinic was a facade to identify vulnerable women. Those with family who would miss them were passed to Garcia for elimination. Those who were isolated were sent to human trafficking networks. The scope of the criminal operation was much larger than anyone had imagined. It wasn't just about drugs. It was a complete network of exploitation and murder that had been operating for years under the facade of a respected therapist and a local builder. "Sarah," I asked on the phone, "how long have you been seeing Dr. Miller?" "5 years since I married Garcia. Garcia recommended the doctor to you." "Miller?" "Yes. He said he would help me with my anxiety." Everything fit together in a horrible way. Garcia had been systematically beating Sarah to create psychological trauma. Then he had sent her to his partner for treatment, which was actually documentation of her mental deterioration. If Sarah had reached the complete breaking point, she probably would have ended up as one of the women in the photographs. "Agent Miller," I said, "we need to get to the clinic now. The teams are already on the way, but there's something else you should know." "What?" "Dr. Miller disappeared 3 hours ago, right after we arrested Garcia at the pier." My blood ran cold. Does that mean he knew what was happening? "It means he had Garcia under surveillance, and when he saw the operation was compromised, he activated his escape plan." Sarah spoke again on the phone. "Emma, there's something else. Dr. Miller scheduled me for an emergency session tomorrow morning. He said it was crucial for my healing process after the recent trauma." "Tomorrow morning, after Garcia was arrested?" "Exactly, which means he planned to eliminate the last loose end." I completed the sentence. "Your sister was going to be murdered tomorrow, probably during that therapy session." Agent Miller listened as she coordinated operations over the radio. "That's the pattern we've seen in other cases." But Sarah had one final idea. "What if we still go to that appointment, but with federal backup?" "Absolutely not," I immediately replied. "You've risked enough." "Emma, listen to me. After 5 years of being beaten and controlled, after a week of pretending to be you while you risked your life for me, I finally have the chance to face the man who helped psychologically destroy my life. It's too dangerous." "More dangerous than letting him escape and do this to other women?" Agent Miller interrupted. "We could use your sister as bait, with full surveillance and immediate response teams." "No," I said firmly, but Sarah had already made her decision. "Emma, you risked everything to save me. Now it's my turn to risk something to save other women." 6 months later, I was sitting in a federal courtroom while Sarah gave her final testimony against the largest criminal organization that had operated in our region in decades. Dr. Miller had been arrested during the trap therapy session, and with his capture, the entire network had crumbled. Garcia had received life without parole. Dr. Miller also. 17 corrupt police officers had been arrested. 5 judges had resigned while federal investigations continued. And most importantly, 14 missing women were found alive in a trafficking network operating from the clinic. When Sarah stepped off the stand after her testimony, she hugged me tightly. She was no longer the shattered woman who had appeared at my door a year ago. She was a survivor who had helped dismantle the monsters who had tortured her. "How do you feel?" I asked her. "Free," she simply replied. "Completely free for the first time in 5 years." As we walked out of the courthouse, arm in arm, I thought about everything we had been through. An impulsive decision to swap places on one desperate night had resulted in justice not only for us, but for dozens of other women. "You know what's the most ironic thing?" Sarah said as we reached the car. "What?" "Garcia spent years telling me I was weak, stupid, useless, that I would never be strong enough to survive without him." "And what do you think now?" She laughed, a genuine laugh I hadn't heard in years. "I think he didn't know the Miller twin sisters." As we drove toward our new shared apartment, we had decided to live together while Sarah fully recovered. My phone chimed with a message from Agent Miller. "We just arrested the last member of the network in Dallas. Officially, the case is closed." Sarah read the message over my shoulder. "You know what that means?" "What?" "That we can start the rest of our lives." And for the first time in a very long year, we both smiled genuinely. Together, we had faced evil and won. We hadn't just survived, we had prevailed. Now tell me, where are you listening to this story from? Have you ever gone through anything similar? I'd love to hear your experiences. Give this video a like if you made it this far, and subscribe for more stories of women who never gave up.